So before we get started, let's think about what public speaking means to you. So when you hear the word public speaking, what comes to mind? Do you think about the president giving an inaugural address? Do you think about me as your public speaking instructor giving these speeches in class or a lecture in class? Do you think about a stand-up comedian at a nightclub giving his own stand-up routine? All of those are examples of public speaking, but one of the things that they all have in common is their confidence level and their preparedness. So when you're thinking about your level of public speaking, when you think about you giving a speech, are you confident? Are you prepared? And do you have the ability to be effective? Because that's what this class is going to be trying to teach you. And that's what we're going to be learning in this chapter. The things that first we're going to learn what public speaking is, then we're going to learn about anxieties of public speaking, why public speaking is important in your life, and things like how it's similar to conversations and things like that. So keep on scrolling. So let's start with the definition of public speaking. Public speaking is an organized, face-to-face, prepared, intentional way of informing, persuading, or entertaining the audience. It is usually a one speaker to many audience members ratio. So public speaking is similar to conversations, but it's also different than a basic conversation. In a nutshell, public speaking is like a big group conversation, a conversation with one person speaking to a huge group of people, or at least, a number of people at a time. But there are ways that it's similar to conversation, meaning that the speakers and listeners situation is similar, meaning that in a conversation, there's a speaker and listener, and then in public speaking, there's a speaker and listener, and then there's an exchange of ideas. That's another way it's similar. It's usually face to face, even though, there's conversations that can be had over the phone. And then it also depends on feedback, meaning that in conversations, you're having conversations to receive feedback. And then in public speaking, you're also public speaking to receive feedback as well. But there are a number of ways that it is different as well, meaning that public speaking is more focused. When you're having a conversation, you may be talking to your friends, and then they're interjecting and you're interjecting, and the conversation is changing. The topic is going all over the place. But in public speaking, it's more focused. I'm focusing on a more narrow topic, and I'm talking about a more specific thing. And then it's more organized, meaning that I put this speech together, I wrote out an outline, I'm coming here with the intention to give you a message to try to inform you, persuade you, or entertain you. I'm very direct and specific. Whereas in a conversation, it may start off with me calling my homegirl to tell her about something, and then it may spin off into something else because it's not as organized or focused. And then also with public speaking, public speeches are more formal, meaning that you prepare for them, you get dressed for them, you do your hair for them. You put yourself in a situation where you're looking professional to do a public speech, opposed to if you're talking to your friend, you may not be doing all of that. You probably are not doing all of that to do so. So there are similarities and there are differences between public speaking and a normal conversation. So did you know that according to a number of studies and a number of statistics, people's number one fear is public speaking? They fear public speaking more than death. Now, for a lot of people, that's like, that's crazy. How could you fear speaking in front of an audience more than death? Well, I have my theories. And one of my theories is just that public speaking is something that you're faced with all the time. There's always going to be a time where you may have to do a speech or a lecture, especially in the college environment. So you fear that more because it's more likely that that's going to happen. So, oh my God, I got to go do the speech. But we don't really fear death as much because we're not really thinking about death. So if we die, it's like we pass away. We're not thinking about it, so we don't fear it as much. But that's just my thought on it. But the reality is that is going to be on your quiz. So you have to know that people fear public speaking more than death in a lot of situations. So glossophobia is the severe fear of public speaking. And what that means is you fear failure, you fear being rejected, and you fear being judged, meaning that you don't necessarily fear getting up and standing on stage in front of people. You fear that those people are going to reject you, and you feel that those people are going to judge you. Maybe you give a story about something that happens and they judge your story, or they reject the information and they don't receive your message, and you fear failing, meaning that you get up there and you mess up, or you have all of these hiccups and you're so nervous about it. And that's like a lot of the reasons people have anxiety anxiety about public speaking. So there are some misconceptions, according to the University of Wisconsin, that people have. And then it's like you have this all or nothing mindset, meaning that I have to give this my all or it's just going to be terrible, meaning that if I don't do a perfect speech, like perfect, no words messed up, no forgetting anything, I suck. And that's will give you anxiety. Like if it's not perfect, I suck and I have no room for improvement. If it's not perfect the first time, I can never do that. I can never do it again, which comes also from overgeneralization. You have this misconception that literally I am never going to do well ever in life if I mess up on a speech. Like there's no way to improve or get better. So a lot of times, so how do we address this? Well, one, you have to make yourself mentally prepared. You have to put it in your head that you are going to do well, that you are going to be well, that you're going to do great at whatever it is that you set your mind to. Meaning that you have to focus. You have to focus on your message, make sure that your message is appropriate for the audience. Be mindful of your task and give it your full attention and your dedication, meaning you can't divide your attention between other things. We all have life things going on around us. I have life things. I have children. I have a job, two jobs actually, and I am working on my PhD. So if I bring all of those thoughts, for example, oh my God, I have this paper due, I'm not giving you all my full preparedness and I'm not mentally prepared because my attention is divided while I'm giving the speech. So during your speech time, you have to be mindful and focus in on the speech that you are giving so that you can be prepared for the next task, the task at hand. Even though those life things will always be there for that 5 to 10 minutes that you're on the stage, you need to be right front and center with your audience and not be worried about other things, and that will help you reduce your anxiety about your speech. And then you also have to have physical preparation, meaning that you need to get some sleep. You need to exercise some. I know that it's like, what does that have to do with anything? But you do better in your classes, on your exams, everything else if you are physically prepared. You're sleeping, you're eating healthy food. For example, if you're eating proteins, eggs, and stuff like that, good food like that instead of like donuts and coffee and things like that. All of that will also help you be more physically prepared to give your speech. And then additionally, you want to be contextually prepared, meaning that know where you're giving your speech at. Maybe you need to go there. And for example, you're not giving a speech in our classroom because this speech format is online for a lot of you, but for those of you who are going to be giving speeches in this classroom, look at the classroom. Come in the classroom. Come in the classroom when we're not in the building and just do your speech so that you know the environment. But for those of you who are going to be speaking at other places, do the same thing. Know the building, at least know the structure of the building. Look at the picture so that you can also become more contextually prepared so you can see what you're doing and you can focus in on what you're doing and feel more comfortable in your environment doing it. And then also, speech preparation. One, don't procrastinate on your speeches. If you write an outline and you give me an outline, you should be literally looking at that outline, preparing your speech, even doing your speech in front of people at home, like not just your dogs, not just your cats, not your fish, people, actual people. That way when you come to give your speech in front of me in the classroom, it already sounds like you're an expert on it because you've already given that same speech to other people. So I wouldn't put myself in a position where the first time I look at my speech is an hour before I'm supposed to be delivering it because you won't be prepared. And after doing this for the amount of years that I'm doing it, I can tell who's prepared for their speeches and who has not. And mostly those people are actually reading from a lot of cue cards or reading directly from the paper, or I can see you reading from the screen like you're looking down here and I can see that you're reading because your eyes are not focused on the screen because you absolutely are just reading exactly what you wrote, and your tone actually even sounds more robotic when you're doing it. So please be more prepared and take this class seriously because public speaking is important. And a lot of the reason it's important is not because all of you are going to be growing up to be famous public speakers, but you're going to need it to get through the rest of your college journey. You're going to be needing it in interviews, job interviews, and things like that, where you are going to use public speaking on a regular basis. So you should learn how to prepare and be ready to give and deliver a speech. So that is on speech preparation. Lastly, to the point of having anxiety, remember you never look as nervous as you think you look, meaning that for you, you may feel like you're on like a 20 out of 10, like, but it's really not coming off to the audience because they don't see what you feel on the inside. So if you're up there thinking about your stage fright and you're thinking about it in your speech, it's going to mess you up more so if you just give it your all, because they really don't know what you're thinking and you're feeling. And especially if you're prepared, it's okay to be a little bit nervous, because you are nervous signifies that you care about something. So now let's talk about the transactional model of communication and how it applies to public speaking. So first we'll talk about the sender and receiver. So when we talk about sender and receiver, we're talking about people. So the first person would be the sender, meaning that's the person, for example, me, who's giving a message, and you are the receiver, meaning that you're the audience and you're receiving that message. So I am the sender of that message, and you are the receiver or recipient of that message. So that's what they mean. It's sender, receiver, person. Person one is giving the message, person two is receiving the message. And then when we're talking about the message as a whole, we're talking about the encoding and decoding of a message, meaning that the message is being encoded and then decoded, meaning that the sender, which would be me, is encoding, which is the process of the sender putting his or her thoughts and feelings into words or symbols. So I'm putting my thoughts and feelings into words and symbols and expressing them to the receiver, who is decoding it, meaning that decoding is the process of the listener or receiver understanding the words and the symbols in the message and making it meaningful for them. So I'm going to, as the sender, I'm encoding this message and I'm giving you all my thoughts and my feelings, and you are decoding them and you're breaking them down and making them true for yourself. So that's the process of encoding and decoding. And then the next one, we talk about channels. So when we're talking about the channel, we're talking about the vehicle for which the message is coming through. Like, is it coming through the TV screen? Is it coming through the internet? Is it coming through the laptop? How are you receiving the words? So for example, in public speaking, a lot of times it's face to face, meaning that I'm on a stage and I am delivering this message directly to you. So there's no actual technology involved. But a lot of times with mass communication, like for example, the president giving the inaugural address, meaning you're watching that on TV. Only the people, the selected few people who are in that room are actually seeing it, but you're watching it. So the channel is actually, where's the message coming through? Is it radio? Is it TV? Is it face to face? What's the vehicle for the message? Where's it coming through? So now we're going to be talking about noise. So noise, I'm not necessarily talking about somebody interrupting your speech, even though that is noise. But noise in the transactional model of communication is considered something or anything that is interfering with the person who is giving the speech or interfering with the person who is trying to receive the information. So there are so many things that can, come into the communication process to interrupt the message that is being given. It could be something physical that comes into the environment that makes it difficult for the person who's listening or receiving the message to give the message. It can also be something like in a health effect, something in the health can be affected, and it can make it difficult for the person who's receiving the message to gain that message. There are a lot of different ways. The anxiety of past experiences can eliminate my focus. Like, you may say something that triggers me and you just lose my attention totally. There are a lot of ways that noise can be a factor when it comes to the communication process. And then there's feedback, which is one of the most important elements in the public speaking sector. I mean, all types of communication depend on some type of feedback. But for public speaking, it's not necessarily that you're going to really get like feedback afterwards, where it's like everybody's writing you and giving you feedback about your speech. Your feedback may come in the form of somebody smiling, sitting up straight, clapping, agreeing with the yes, so you're kind of getting the feedback that you're doing well. But then it also can be bad feedback, somebody putting their head down, somebody rolling their eyes and not liking what it is that you're saying. So you know that you're in a position where you're kind of losing some people, and then you may have to clarify some points to make it more like stern and credible when people are giving you faces like, what? So your feedback more so is nonverbal when it comes to public speaking, and it's when you're looking and analyzing your audience. And your final element is going to be your outcome. Sorry, I was looking at it and then I seen that I skipped one. But either way, so let's start with outcome. So outcome is going to be a very important one. Did you get the person to do what it is that you wanted to do? What was the outcome of the situation? For example, if you wanted to get your audience to become blood donors, like did your speech empower them or influence them to, or did they reject your speech? How many people went and signed up for the blood donor list after your speech? And that's kind of the outcome. What happened after your speech? And that's kind of sometimes hard to depict, especially if you don't have contact with those people afterwards. But it definitely is something that you want, because that will be the entire reason that you're giving the speech, is to have some kind of outcome or some kind of changed mind or behavior about a particular topic area. So now, lastly, since I skipped the context portion of it, the context is pretty much it has many levels, and there are several ways to have context, and one of the contexts is like the historical context. There's a cultural context. There's the social context. There's a physical context. For example, cultural context, is the learning of language and symbols and behaviors. Historical is learning about facts and previous things, like what context is your speech? What context is the information that you're relaying to your audience in? So that those are the transactional models of communication. So now let's talk about public speaking as an art form, and discuss Cicero's five canons of rhetoric and how public speaking is used artistically, and what you have to do to develop public speaking in an artistic way. So first, it's invention, and that is pretty much meaning to create the content, to dispose meaning. So meaning I'm going to create content. Like a lot of times now we're with social media, there's a lot of content creators. So that's going to be like the first thing that you need to do. Invention. Invent your idea, invent your speech, like invent your topic to put it out there. Then we're going to talk about style, and that's literally like the organization and the logical argument. Like, what is the style of your speech? Pretty much, are you informing someone? What style are you going to use? What type of speech are you going to use? What speech patterns are you going to use? What's the style of the speech? Then how are you going to arrange your speech? Choosing the level of quality, the vocabulary, just how are you going to put this speech together? And then you have your memory. Are you going to memorize your speech? Memorizing famous speeches to learn good public speaking skills. So memorizing speeches that were, previously done by other people. Memorizing those speeches can help you learn how to be a more effective public speaker. But when it comes to your speech, what format are you going to use? Are you going to memorize the speech? Are you going to do an impromptu speech? Are you going to do an extemporaneous speech? We're going to get to what all of those speeches mean later on in the semester. But, how are you going to memorize your speech? And then lastly, delivery. And that's pretty much the nonverbal communication. That's the body language. How are you going to dress? How are you going to move around the stage? Are you going to use hand gestures? Are you going to make eye contact? That's kind of that nonverbal communication that your speech really depends on. And that's pretty much in a nutshell how public speaking is kind of an art form. There's an art to it. There's a swag to it. So now we'll just talk a little bit about the value of public speaking in your life. It has the ability to enhance your skills, like educationally, professionally, and personally. Because a lot of you are like, I'm not going to be a public speaker. This is just a course that is required for me to get into my program or to graduate. But the question then becomes, why do you think public speaking, even though it has nothing to do, quote unquote, with what you're trying to do, why do you think it's required? Because public speaking is a class that helps you build your confidence. Public speaking is a class that prepares you for the interview. Public speaking is a class that gets you in the mindset of being a leader in this world. And guess what? You are going to need those skills no matter what you do and where you go. If you look at some of the statistics on Google, Auntie Google, as my best friend calls it, you will look at the statistic and you'll see that most jobs, one of their top two requirements is public speaking skills. And they believe that a lot of their employees are lacking public speaking skills. So you don't have to be an effective public speaker who speaks to the world, but everyone wants people to work for them who has the ability to have good and effective public speaking skills. So this is why this class is going to be important for you, so that when you leave Atlanta Tech, you are able to do whatever it is that you want to do. So, as we spoke about in a previous slide, here are some ways to reduce your speaking anxiety. That's mental preparation, meaning focus on what it is that you're supposed to be focusing on at the moment, meaning that whatever's going on outside of public speaking or whatever's going on outside of your speech needs to wait, and you need to focus and prepare your speech so that you can mentally focus on that thing for that time frame. And then you have physical preparation, meaning eat well before you give your speech. Well, eat well all the time. I am one who can't judge because I don't always eat great. But eating well and getting a good night's sleep will help you be physically prepared. And then contextually prepared is pretty much know your environment. Where are you getting ready to give this speech? Even if you're doing your speech online and you're going to be recording your speech like some of you are, it is very important for you to still like know where you're going to sit down, where you're going to put your camera. Practice before you do it, because if it's due at 11:59 and you start at 11 and you're like, oh my God, the lighting in this room is terrible, but I don't really have anywhere else that I can move because I already set up here, you're really not actually contextually prepared. So make sure that you're mentally, physically, and contextually prepared. Remember that timing is everything. It is very important for you to stay within the time parameters that you are given for your speech, meaning you need to be practicing, because a lot of times students will be like, oh, 5 minutes, that's too long. I'm not going to be able to talk for 5 minutes. And then they get up there because they did not practice and prepare and talk for 12 minutes. And it's like, hey, you didn't have 12 minutes. You're slowing us up here. And a lot of times that happens as well. If you do not prepare how long your speech is, you'll do it in the right reverse. Like, you'll get up there for 1 minute and feel like you've been talking for 20, but no, you weren't. And so if you prepare and actually time yourself, talk to yourself in front of a mirror, even do things as far as do your speech in front of other people, record yourself giving your speech and watch it so that you are prepared to stay on time, because I do deduct points when you do not stay within my time parameters. A lot of times that's really because we have a lot of students in the class that we have to get through for the speeches, but it's also a method of discipline. Are you disciplined enough to be structured enough to stay within that time frame? If somebody at a job interview tells you, explain yourself to me in 30 seconds, and it takes you 10 minutes, you lack discipline. So timing, making sure that you stay within time is very important. Muscle memory is another way to reduce speaking anxiety. And muscle memory is just like within a sport. So say you play football, you always have to be exercising. Even if you're not in the season, you have to be constantly preparing, constantly disciplining your body to be prepared for when you do get into a game, you can play. For example, if I went out there to throw a football right now, I would not be able to do much, right? But somebody who like has been doing football forever will be able to, because they've been practicing and they are prepared. So muscle memory when it comes to speeches is constantly being in front of an audience, constantly be talking and preparing for speeches, and learning new words, and learning to be more articulate when you're having conversations, even with your friends, and also being on stages and things like that. So the more you give speeches, the better you become at them. So your body starts to remember them, and then your nervousness starts to go away, because it's like, this is second nature. This feels like home because I do this thing all the time. So that's what it means to have muscle memory, because you are actually exercising your speech capabilities constantly. So then we have what's called content and relationship, and that's really the process of people being more interested in you as a person than a whole bunch of statistics. If you go up there and you give me all of these facts and statistics about your claims, but I don't get to know you as the person, you don't tell me any type of story, I don't build a relationship with you at all, I am probably not listening. I'm probably tired. I'm like, what are all these big words? Oh my God, if she gives me one more statistic, I am not going to remember the statistic. But I am probably going to remember the story that you tell me, and then how it applies to the statistic. And I'll say, oh my goodness, she was talking about X, Y, and Z, and it's so relatable that now it actually is effective because I remember it. So even if you have all of the facts in the world, even if you know for a fact what you're saying is correct, if you cannot engage with and relate to your audience, it's going to be meaningless, because you will never get through to them if this just becomes a statistical, COVID-19 statistically, has killed this many people, and this data proves this, and in the United Kingdom, it was this many people. Yeah, yes, I'm tired now. But if you tell me the story about how it in fact it impacted your relationship with your mother, or something happened to your uncle, or tell me a real story about it, and then say something about this statistic, I am more likely to care and more likely to listen and commit it to memory. So, content and relationship is very important to reducing speech anxiety because the more people like you, the more credible you seem to be, and the more comfortable you can be. Because guess what? People are going to be nodding their heads, relating to your authentic self rather than a whole bunch of statistics that you give me. In addition, in public speaking, it is important to know your strengths and know your weaknesses. So I feel like you can model your speech after somebody like a famous public speaker that you like really like because that can be effective. Like you're not imitating them, it's you're emulating the situation because it's like, hey, this works, so I'm gonna do this as well. But you need to know your strengths and weaknesses. Everything doesn't work for everybody. I use a lot of sarcasm and humor when I speak, and it just works for me. People seem to like it, but that may not work for somebody who's not sarcastic and humorous. So, it may feel uncomfortable for them. So, knowing your strengths and your weaknesses is going to be powerful because if you're up there and you're trying to be somebody that you're not, it's going to be ineffective. So, it's good to model your speech, but model your speech after people who represent the type of speeches that you want to give and the type of speeches that you want to do. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And then there are also personality assessments that you can use to figure out what type of person you are. Myers-Briggs is a good one. The book discusses Myers-Briggs, so I'm mentioning it as well. But just kind of knowing yourself will help you build confidence because I personally believe it's more important to have confidence in yourself than it is for you to rehearse and prepare a speech. For example, if you tell me to come up there and give a speech on anything, mostly anything, don't ask me to do anything on like biomedical engineering, but I would be like, okay, cool. But that's just because I'm confident in me. I'm confident in my ability to get up there and appeal to people because I've been through my struggles, I've been through my ups, I've been through my downs, I've worked through my mental breakdowns in my emotional capacities. So now I feel like I'm a well-rounded person, which makes it easier for me to give speeches. So I say that to say one knowing your strengths and your weaknesses will make speech giving effective because now you don't really fear judgment because you've already worked through the inners of what other people could have to say about you when you see it as irrelevant. Lastly, practice, practice, practice. We said it several times in this video, but practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So you're never going to be perfect. None of us are going to be perfect. And a lot of us may believe that we are perfect, but we're not. But it will become permanent. Your speech will become permanent. Your idea will become permanent. Your thoughts will become permanent. So continue to practice. We're going to have 3 speeches in this course that you're going to have to do. And the more you practice at them, the better you become with them. And even though, again, you may not be taking public speaking into like the field of public speaking and becoming a well-known public speaker, but you'll take that confidence with you when you leave this class.